What gives a story vitality? To me, it all comes back to tension curves. Hey, it's Brian, and this is Thinking Through Thursday when we talk about the craft of writing. I had my idea for the Arcadian Legacy long ago, but I didn't really do much with it except to write a couple thousand words because I never really felt like it had life in it. And I now realize that really comes down to how the tension builds over time in the book. I still have a lot to unlearn now, but one thing I did write was to step back and to dedicate time to defining how the tension builds throughout the book, something that many call, including myself, call the tension curve. I also took time to learn about the classic tension curves that shape your favorite story, like the hero's return and my favorite, the Fichtean curve. But it's just a good starting point for you to get the overall shape of how you want your story to build over time. For me, I took one of those curves and reshaped it into something all my own. It's something that progressively builds over time, but there is times of relief, take a breath. But of course, it's continually building to the climax. And I've realized over the last couple of years that it's really difficult to get that right. I'm not saying I've gotten it right, but I've definitely put a lot of attention and love toward that process. One of the things that I did to work on the tension curve of my story was to treat it like a large language model where I trained it on a large set of data. I sat down and I looked at all the possible shapes that the story could take, and I thought how those interacted with my main characters, specifically the antagonists, and how it interacted with different subplots that I had in mind and different elements of lore. And eventually, just like anything else, you refine the shape, and over a longer period of time than I initially anticipated, you build it into something that you think to yourself, this could stand on its own two legs. And then when the shape emerges, you can sit down and start writing for real. I would have never guessed years ago how much time I would have dedicated to this part of the process. It was months, in fact. And that includes working on much of the lore and the characters and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of that time was dedicated to carefully refining that tension curve into something that I wanted it to be. Anyways, there's a lot to talk about on this subject in the coming months. But what books have you read where you thought to yourself, wow, the author nailed the structure of this book? And don't forget, the Arcadian Legacy is coming out next year.